There is a moment in every historical investigation where a detail buried in old practices suddenly snaps into clarity. For years, the question has lingered among archaeologists and survivalists. How did Viking settlers keep warm through brutal northern nights without burning through every last stick of firewood? Their winters were unforgiving, daylight scarce, and resources limited. Yet these communities survived, farmed, raised families, and even thrived on coastlines swept with icy Atlantic winds. One small but powerful method stands out as both ingenious and surprisingly practical even today. Before diving into the mechanics, it is worth holding on to one scene: a Viking homestead, its people asleep, and a heat source quietly radiating warmth long after the flames died. This wasn't magic, and it wasn't luck. It was a deliberate engineering choice rooted in understanding heat, mass, and slow release. This technique, often overlooked or misunderstood, is one of the earliest forms of what survivalists today call a heat battery. How the Viking heat trap worked as a simple but powerful engineering principle. At the centre of this method is the idea of thermal mass. Vikings understood that certain materials, once heated, would continue to radiate warmth long after direct fire faded. Stone, clay, and densely packed earth were their main tools. When heated early in the evening, these materials would hold on to that energy and release it slowly throughout the night. Archaeological digs in Iceland, Greenland, and Norway consistently reveal fire pits and hearths lined or surrounded with stone configurations that were not decorative. Their placement shows intentional design meant to store heat, not merely contain flames. The silent Viking heat trap often took the form of a stone-lined pit or a cluster of heavy rocks heated inside a hearth before being moved, either to the centre of a room or beneath a raised sleeping platform. Some hearth designs were recessed into the floor, a feature that created a natural chamber where heat collected and radiated gently upward. Because heat rises and dense stone holds warmth for hours, the result was a room that remained warm without a new flame. This meant fewer sparks, less smoke, safer sleep, and drastically reduced fuel usage in regions where every log had to be earned. Historical evidence shows that this technique lasted because it was reliable. Excavations at Viking-age longhouses show thick clay floors and central hearths with stone reinforcements. These stones show heat-wear patterns indicating repeated heating cycles. In Icelandic turf houses that still stand today, similar methods are used, proving continuity over more than a millennium. Even sagas describe nights when the fire had burned out, but the dwelling remained warm. These references are brief, almost casual, because to the people living then, this was simply how things were done. The choice of stone mattered as well. Dense, dark stones with high heat capacity such as basalt or granite worked best. Coastal communities used rounded shoreline stones that naturally resisted cracking. Stones were heated, sometimes for hours, then used as long-release heat sources beneath benches or beside bedding. How you can replicate this heat trap today with simple materials. Anyone who enjoys bushcraft, off-grid building, or historical reconstruction can apply this method with almost no tools. The first step is selecting stones that can handle repeated heating. Smooth, dense stones from riverbeds or quarries are ideal. Stones that are porous or contain moisture can crack or even explode, so, choosing correctly is essential. The next step requires creating a safe heating area. A campfire or an indoor wood stove works well. Heating the stones until they are too hot to touch ensures that the thermal mass has time to absorb a full charge of heat. Once heated, the stones can be arranged beneath a raised bed frame, inside a clay-lined pit, or along the interior wall of a shelter. Covering them with thick cloth, wool, or even a layer of earth helps distribute warmth while preventing accidental burns and slowing the release of heat even more. For a modern practical example, consider a small off-grid cabin built from reclaimed wood. Instead of burning firewood all night, one can heat a line of granite stones in the evening and place them in a trench filled with sand beneath the sleeping platform. By morning, the stones will still emit warmth. Another example is a winter campsite. Heating 3 or 4 fist-sized stones by the fire and setting them at the foot of a sleeping bag wrapped in a spare layer can provide heat until dawn. These aren't hypothetical tricks, but methods tested for centuries across northern climates. Why this technique matters to survivalists and history enthusiasts today. The silent heat trap is not simply an archaeological curiosity. In an age where energy costs rise and grid outages happen with increasing frequency, the Viking approach reminds us that warmth does not always require constant combustion. It requires understanding materials and controlling the pace of heat release. Homesteaders use similar principles when building rocket mass heaters, thermal banks, or cob benches. The Viking method is the stripped-down ancestor of all these innovations. More than that, this technique demonstrates how deeply the Vikings understood their environment. Their seafaring exploits often overshadow their domestic innovations, but their survival depended on mastering both. This heat trap stands as a rare meeting point between history, engineering, and practical bushcraft. Applying this ancient method in long-term preparedness planning can really make a difference. One long-term application is integrating stone or earthen thermal mass into modern shelter designs. For instance, a small survival cabin or root cellar can be built with a central stone bench that is heated once in the evening, and then, it radiates warmth all night. Another application involves outdoor field setups where conserving fuel is, absolutely crucial. A single batch of firewood can heat stones that then maintain a cooking or sleeping area at workable temperatures long after the fire is out. This method also works for gardeners who are protecting seedlings in cold frames. Preheated stones placed inside a small enclosure can maintain temperature stability through a cold night, reducing frost risk and extending growing seasons. The silent Viking heat trap is a reminder that some of the smartest survival strategies come from people who lived close to the land and relied on skill rather than endless resources. For anyone interested in history, resilience, or off-grid living, methods like this are both timeless and immediately useful. If you found value in this deep dive and want more historical insights that hold real modern power, make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and, share this video with others who appreciate serious history and practical survival knowledge.